How's it going, everyone? So I recently decided I wanted to start making prints of my art to try to sell it. Most of my art is done traditionally, so my first thought was, how do I capture like high quality digital images of my art to make the prints and just like that entire process. After just a couple of Google searches, I found like the main ways that people capture like high quality digital images of their art are to either use a flatbed scanner to scan your art, just like put it down on the flatbed and scan it, or use a camera and actually take photographs of the art. I don't have a flatbed scanner and I don't really want to buy one, but I do already have a decent camera that I can utilize for this, so I decided that I'm just going to go with the camera route. Most of the art that I do is it would be small enough to fit on a flatbed scanner, but since I already have the camera, I'm gonna go that route. It also seems like the camera method itself is the preferred method by most people anyways, just because it seems like you can get higher quality like digital images of your art that way. And if your art is large, or if it's like highly textured, or you paint on like a thick canvas or something, it might not be able to scan very well on a flatbed scanner. So I think going the route of using a camera is what works best for most people anyways. So let's just get into what you're going to need to photograph your art. And the only real like necessities that you really need would be a camera and a sturdy tripod. You might be able to get away with not using a tripod if you had something sturdy to set your camera on, but I would just invest in a nice tripod, especially if you're planning to take a lot of photos. It'll just make it a lot easier in the future. For my camera, I'll be using a Fujifilm X-M5. It's a 26 megapixel crop sensor camera, and I'm just using the kit lens that came with the camera when I bought it. This is typically the camera that I use to film my videos, so I already had it and I didn't like just buy it for this specific situation. Depending on what you're going to be using your images for, you can probably get away with using your phone in certain situations. A lot of modern smartphones take really high quality images and can even shoot in RAW. I know my phone is several years old now and it can shoot raw photos as well. I've never used my phone in this case. Like, I will take pictures of my art for like Instagram and that sort of thing, but never taken any tried taking any high quality photos to use for prints or anything like that. I use my nicer camera for this reason, just because I got it, so I might as well use it. And I'm capturing my art for prints that I want to sell in the future, so I just want to have the highest quality possible with what I've got. Next, I want to talk about lighting. This is probably one of the most important parts when it comes to capturing a good photo of your artwork. Typically, the more light, the better. And some people, they'll have like large studio lights for this purpose, but I don't have anything like that. I do have a relatively large window in the living room that lets in a lot of natural light, and that tends to work really well for me. You could also just go outside on an overcast day. From what I've seen, that works really well too. It'd probably be better for me to just go outside, but doing it inside works a lot easier for me, and the pictures come out great, I think. So doing them inside is just what works best. So let's go into the living room and we can start getting things set up. Okay, we're here in the living room, and the main thing you want to do when you're setting up your art is make sure that your light source is hitting your art indirectly and not straight at it, or you can see some glare or reflection on your final image. So you wouldn't want to set up your art facing directly at your window. You'd want it turned at least like slightly away from it. And I typically have to take these photos like in the morning or early afternoon, at least before the sun starts going down, or the sun will start blasting through this window and it just casts a lot of shadows and it's almost too bright and it just doesn't look very good. So avoiding like that, I feel like that direct sunlight also helps. So now that we've got our art set up how we want, let's get our camera set up. First, you want to set your focal length to about 50 millimeters. And if you're not familiar with focal length, just think of it kind of like zoom. And my camera has a crop factor of about 1.6 or so, I'd set my focal length to about 32 millimeters. This doesn't have to be exact, and I'll change it like occasionally I might zoom in or zoom out just to get the perfect, the frame it so I can get it framed up exactly how I want to. Now, once you got your camera set up on your tripod, line up your camera with your art as well as you can, leaving a small bit of room around the edges, and we'll crop that off later when we edit the photo. I like to get it as tight as possible though, so we can take advantage of most of my camera's sensor. The more pixels you have in your photo, the larger the print you'll be able to make and retain a high quality, but we won't get into that. Now that we've got everything set up here, let's go into our camera settings and make sure that we've got everything set up there how we need it. I'm using a Fujifilm camera, so my settings menu will look a little different from yours if you're using a different camera, but you should be able to find the same or similar settings in your camera's settings menu as well. So the first thing I'm going to do is make sure my camera is in a manual shooting mode. I'll do that by setting the dial on the top of my camera for M to manual. Next, I want to make sure I'm shooting in a RAW format. In my settings menu, I'll find image quality and set it to RAW. RAW images are just larger sized image files with a lot more data than standard JPEG images. They're a lot better to use if you're going to be editing your images, which we are going to. Next, we can set a custom white balance. I usually do this just because I have the option, but I think you can probably just leave it set to auto white balance since we'll be editing the photo later. But if you want to set your white balance, go to your white balance setting and select custom. Again, it could be different for everybody. After I select custom, I'll select something neutral white on the screen in frame and then press the shutter button, and then that'll just set the custom white balance. Next, I'll set my autofocus setting to a single autofocus so my camera doesn't try to refocus or anything like that. This is just kind of a preference though. You'd probably be fine just using your default like continuous autofocus setting. And I'm sure a lot of people would prefer to just use a manual focus here to make sure their image is perfectly in focus. Modern autofocus is good though, so just using single autofocus works for me. Next, turn on your self timer. Mine is here in the shooting settings. I always set it to 2 seconds, but some people will set it to 10 to make sure that they avoid any kind of camera shake, but I think 2 seconds is long enough. And if you're going to be taking lots of photos, I don't want to wait 10 seconds for every photo that I'm going to take. I've been using 2 seconds and I haven't had any kind of like camera shake or anything like that be an issue when I'm taking photos. Okay, we're almost done with the camera settings. I know it seems like kind of a lot, but once you've got it all set up, you'll be able to take a lot of photos of your art relatively quickly, and after you've set it up once, it'll be a lot easier to do next time. And if you're familiar with like cameras and camera settings and all that stuff, all this is probably pretty easy to use, so it's not going to be a problem. Okay, finally we have the last 3 and probably the most important settings that we need to set on our camera, which are ISO, aperture, and shutter speed. These are the 3 main pieces when it comes to photography, and I'm not going to go through like an entire lecture over it, but I'll describe it briefly what each one is as I'm going through it. Starting with ISO, this is your camera sensor's sensitivity to light. The higher the number, the more sensitive the sensor will be, but a higher ISO introduces more overall noise in the image, and we don't want that, so we'll keep this number as low as possible. My camera supports the lowest native ISO of 160, so that's what I'm going to set it to. Next is aperture, which is an opening in your camera's lens that lets in light. It's also used to adjust depth of field and indicated by f-stop numbers. On my screen, it's indicated by an F. The higher the f-stop number, the smaller the opening will be. We want a little bit deeper depth of field to keep everything that's in frame sharp and in focus, so an f-stop number from anywhere from 8 to 11 will do. I usually just keep mine at 11, and really with this, I don't know if it matters a ton, because if we're shooting a flat piece of art, we don't need like a super deep depth of field, but it doesn't hurt to keep it between 8 and 11. And then finally, we have shutter speed, which is how long the shutter in your camera stays open, exposing your sensor to light, and is measured in fractions of a second. On my camera, it's indicated by an SS for shutter speed. I chose to talk about this last just because you need to just adjust your shutter speed until you get the correct exposure indicated by your light meter on your camera. Like here on my camera, I want the light meter indicator to be on the 0 right in the middle. So it ended up being at 10, which is 1/10 of a second, which is a pretty slow shutter speed. This is why we have to have a tripod and set a 2-second timer for each photo. Because if I tried taking these photos, like just holding the camera, every photo would come out blurry no matter how still I tried to stay. And like I said, you could maybe just set your camera down on like a table or something, but it's just a lot easier if you have a tripod. And then one thing I typically try to do before I take the photo is set a white piece of paper in front of my artwork and take a photo of it. I can use this to set white balance in my editing software if I need to later on. And now we're finally able to take our photo. And that's it. We can pop back over to the computer and I will show you how I process and edit these photos. I use Lightroom to edit my photos, but you can really use whatever editing software that you're comfortable with and accomplish the same thing. Even free editing software will have a lot of the same functions and get the job done. If you're looking for something free, I would suggest GIMP. It's been around for a long time and that's just one that I'm familiar with, but you can really use whatever you find. I also found that Affinity Photo is recently free and I know a lot of people use that and it might be a little easier to learn than GIMP. It can be a little weird sometimes, but either one would be fine. So the first thing I do when I'm editing these photos is square up everything and crop it. Lightroom has a pretty good tool for squaring everything up, and I'll also crop it in a tad bit to make sure everything looks good around the edges. Now we can go over and make any adjustments we need. Our main goal here is to attempt to make the photo look as close to your original artwork as possible, and I try to make as little adjustments as possible and only really make necessary changes. First, I'll make sure the white balance looks okay. This is where we can use our photo we took of the white paper to automatically adjust our white balance if we need to. After that, I'll typically bump up the exposure a little bit and tweak the shadows and highlights. And depending on the artwork, I might bump up the saturation a little bit. And after that, we're done. And the only thing left to do is to export your photo. Typically, I just export as a high quality JPEG and that will be sufficient for most things. You'll always have your raw file of the image and that you can export again later if you need to. So that's going to just about wrap it up. This is how I've been capturing my artwork and it's been working out really well for me. I hope I was able to help you out in some way so you can start photographing and capturing your artwork as well. I really like having a high quality digital copy of my artwork so I can have it stored forever and always be able to use it for sharing online or prints or whatever else I want to use it for. It would really suck to lose an original art piece that you created, but having it stored safely online somewhere makes me feel a little bit better about it, I suppose. But anyways, thanks for watching. I appreciate you. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Hey, if you're still watching, while I was making this video, I was able to get my Etsy shop set up, and I got some sample prints back, and I just wanted to share those with you. So the first one, we've got the mushroom that we edited in this video. Next, we've got this one called the forest floor. And then finally, we've got this one here, the wizard tower. This one's probably my favorite out of the three. All of these will be available on my Etsy shop along with some other work that I've done. You can get prints in 5x7, 8x10, and 11x14. So if you want to go check that out, I'll link my Etsy shop down in the description. Again, thanks for watching. Bye-bye.